the show, I just want to remind you guys that I do a newsletter every Monday. It's a sales tip straight to your inbox. It's called Sales Ammo. You can sign up for free to receive these emails by going to artofsba.com, and we'll put you on the email list. And then you can start getting these golden sales nuggets every single Monday to start your week. All right, now let's get on with the intro. All right, we're keeping this New Orleans series going. Welcome back. If you're watching us on YouTube, you probably see a special guest here in my lap. And the reason for that is because today's episode is about technology, and we have to find a way to keep, that's right, technology interesting. And I've already used my puppies too much, so I think it's time to use my daughter for clicks. I know I'm a horrible human being, but today on the podcast, we have Kyle Gustafson. Kyle is someone I've known in the industry for a long time now, and he used to be a rep at a software company for many years and then went to another one. He's at Partner now, so he kind of left the gig of selling software. And so I thought it'd be a cool idea to have him on to say, hey, Kyle, listen, now that you're on the outside, don't hold back. Tell me really what's going on here with all of these different technology companies selling different software. What's good? What's bad? What are we missing? What should we be looking out for? Because honestly, I don't think, COVID forced all this LOS and software and technology stuff on us, but I don't think we were quite ready for it as an industry because we're coming from a really old school mindset. And so we're going out shopping for this software, but we don't really know what we're doing. So I thought I'd have Kyle on to catch up with him while we were both at the NAGGL conference and ask him firsthand to tell us his unbridled take on what's going on with this technological movement in the SBA industry. So without further ado, no, what are you doing? It's okay. We're almost done. Here's our episode with Kyle Gustafson. The SBA industry is rooted in banking, and banking is old school, but that's all starting to change. You hear people talk about AI, and it all sounds great, but let's be real. You and I don't know the first thing about AI, but Lumos does. Lumos is an analytics company that provides small business lenders with better tools that drive better decisions in a more efficient process. Take the Lumos Business Report, for example. This is going to completely revolutionize how deals get underwritten, starting with the BDO. The Lumos Business Report allows lenders to search for a specific business and in seconds access all kinds of information like a business overview, industry data, insights into competition, average pricing, even a predicted expected loss, all tailored around that specific loan request. Guys, we can finally make credit decisions using actual data. Stop using what you think you know about an industry to make credit decisions and start using the whole story. Let Lumos take your small business lending to the next level with cutting-edge analytics and AI by going to lumosdata.com and scheduling your demo today. So, Kyle, sorry, guys. I know I do this for like a living, but I suck at it.
Oh, no, you're doing fine, man. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the podcast, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks.
Good to have you here.
Likewise, I'm excited to be a guest.
Yeah, so, we go way back. I know I met you at some of these SBA conferences. You were selling software. That's what you've done for, how many years were you doing that?
About a decade.
Okay, good. And you switched over to a company that, a lot of us know called Partner.
Yeah.
And I thought, I wanted to get you on, to hear the update on your life, but also I wanted to talk about the technology stuff and the LOS stuff, because now that you are sort of out of it, you can like give us sort of a sort of unbiased kind of like guidance on how lenders can navigate this whole new, LOS technology kind of environment we're in, where we're all trying to figure out what to do, because we all know now this is the time. COVID really made it very clear to everyone that now is the time to do it. But before we get into all that, I just want to understand, like, why did you go to Partner?
Oh, yeah.
Like, don't they do phase ones?
They do phase ones. They do a lot of things.
They do a lot
phase
of things.
ones. They can do phase twos, remediations, also construction risk mitigation.
Joey.
And-
Shout out Joey.
Yeah, Joey, exactly. Yeah, so and they'd actually approached me years ago before I got into technology, and in my past, I helped a company out of Denver grow their construction risk mitigation systems for SBA, and that's how I kind of found my way into SBA. Was going to a show and being like, oh, have you guys ever heard of funds control? And at the SBA show, they're like, yeah, we do that all the time. And I was like, finally our market, because that company had only done residential at that time. So I built out that group for them. Joey was actually one of my biggest competitors, as well as Angela there at Tetra Tech. And now they're all at partner. And so it's kind of neat kind of working with everybody that we all used to kind of like, work these conferences
cool.
independently.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that's what kind of got me into SBA originally. And so they invited me to come work for them. They're doing some significant changes to their technology and really investing in that. And so that was one of the other attractive parts of coming to partner, not only because of just the expertise that they have, the depth of talent there and just experts, where if you get into something you've never experienced before in real estate, asbestos, or just any of those things that come up, like there's somebody there that is like an expert in that, and you can be like, oh, how do we fix this? And so luckily I don't have to be that person. I can go find you that person, which is something, and learn something myself while I do it. So that was one kind of interesting part of going to partner, is working with a really deep team. And then they're making some really interesting innovations towards their technology. Just
Like what?
Well, if you think about it, like just data in general that they have. They've been doing all these reports, all these environmental reports, all these different property condition reports, all these different things for decades. And so imagine having that much data on all these different real estate transactions, all these different real estate properties, and what you could do with that. Like you mentioned, in the fintech space or in the modern technology space, most of these LOSs or customer experiences are going to have to go out to get data somewhere. It's not going to be in the LOS. It's going to go to like I'm trying to think like a tax card, go out and get a tax transcript from the IRS, or credit data. We're all used to pulling credit, things like that. Imagine, how valuable some of that data could be around environmental issues or those types of things from all the different things they see. And then, you take a data scientist who can take all that data and then say, all right, so if we're doing this type of property in this area, you can start to play the odds, right? The odds of something like this coming up are 1 in 1,000, or, ooh, okay, this is a little bit like a dry cleaners. This is a little higher risk property. Now, some of that already exists, but using real-time data or not real-time data, but data that's been, vetted and used.
Because right now
in
it's
the
a
past.
crapshoot.
It might be, yeah. And so, yeah, exactly. Like in lending, some things like RMA has done a good job, like explaining what risk is in a certain scenario, but that hasn't really gone outside of credit, right? Let's talk about it through environmental. Let's talk about it in construction. Let's talk about all these different things that you could use data to really help you make an informed decision. And so partners really staffing up on that side.
Yeah, I mean, everything's data technology now, and all these, lending, the environmental, the appraisals, all these different functions within our kind of orbit, they've been so kind of dated and slow to adapt over the years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a very manual process, as I'm sure you've experienced in your lending world.
There's definitely still a lot of SBA lenders working off Excel. Like they don't even, right? That's what we want to get into, right? Because you were, up until recently, you've been working with lenders, seeing like what they use, right?
Yeah.
And it's nothing essentially in many cases.
Like you said, Excel. There are some innovative lenders out there that have built some basic systems to help them get some things done. But like you've experienced and your borrowers have experienced, there's a lot of things that have to be manually generated because SBA has so much nuance to it. And SBA's done a decent job of trying to minimize those forms down. Like right now, I think we're all waiting for the new 1919 that's going to have the 1920 in it. That's going to be kind of revised. It'll be interesting to see how that's either hopefully truncated a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm on pins and needles.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right?
Mhm.
We're at the end of the day, this whole, like, we're at the NAGGL conference right now,
Mhm.
and this whole entire ecosystem is all centered around essentially small businesses borrowing money.
Yeah.
To do different things.
Mhm.
And this is all being fueled by their expectations and the changing expectations in our world, which is that people want things fast, they
Mhm.
want it easy, and SBA lending and environmental stuff, all this, nuance, it's anything but. So
Yeah.
there's things we can do though, right? Like, I mean, putting an LOS in place is like the that's like the baseline, right? You got to kind of start there. So I want to get into it with you, okay?
Sure.
So I prepared some questions. So I go out to the exhibit hall. I see all these different tech companies. They're all marketing to SBA lenders.
Mhm.
And my question is, like, how do I tell them apart? Like, are all LOSs the same? Like, how do I go into the exhibit hall, not here, but in general, the exhibit hall of life, and differentiate between the different companies?
Yeah. When you're approaching technology and you're approaching vendors in this world, you really want to know what you want, okay? And that's hard, right? Because if you're used to doing everything manually, from the very beginning. Oh, I remember taking my fancy clipboard to my office and going over there and filling out everything with the different borrowers I worked with. And remember thinking, like, I can't believe there's not a software that does this already, as a BDO. Like, oh my gosh, like this needs to be done. This should have been done a long time ago. There are softwares that do automate those things, but you as like you work with closers, you work with packagers, processors, then there's a whole back end process too. There's a lot of different people that have to handle these files, right, for the borrower. And so one of the challenges for anybody that is a lender is walking into that exhibit hall and seeing these, like, I'll call them shiny objects. And so I do that with a little bit of like a tongue-in-cheek joke there. There is a challenge that you see this cool shiny object. It's happened in our industry at times where it looks really cool. It looks amazing. Oh my gosh. But does it actually do the jobs that you need it to do? That's the question. So if you go into that exhibit hall and you don't know what technology can do or what you need it to do, you're probably not going to find the right app for your bank or for you. You need to know the jobs you want automated. And so that's the thing that, as lenders, I think the best approach that they should come to those tech companies with is saying, I need to do this, and most importantly, I need my borrower to have a good experience with the software, because if they don't have a good experience, or my staff doesn't have a good experience, this isn't going to work. Like, nobody's going to engage with this software. And
Interesting. So you kind of tell, because I feel like it's almost kind of in the reverse many times, where they're just saying, hey, we need an LOS. What you got?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then even some, from the software side, when you're building something, you're like, yeah, we think this is pretty good. We think this is what the lenders want. And then, you develop it, you build it, you take it to a few lenders, and, one's like, yeah, this is great. And then all other 10 are like, or, let's say there's 10. The other 9 out of that 10 are like, this isn't good. We do it a different way. And so that's the other issue, is you could have a great shiny object or piece of software, LOS, whatever you want it to be. But if you don't know your process and how it could fit to that process, or conversely, if you're a bank that's stuck in their process, this is the way we've always done it, well, a new piece of technology isn't going to make you any more efficient because you haven't changed your process to meet what this technology can do for you. So it's kind of a double-edged sword there.
The SBA landscape is changing right before our eyes, and technology is a big driver of that. To think, just a decade ago, I was getting physical loan packages mailed to the office. We've come a long way. But a lot of folks are still getting tripped up on emailing documents back and forth. Files are too big, there's security concerns, and my personal favorite, I already sent you that. Now, I don't have those issues because I use Able. Able is a deal acceleration platform focused on driving efficiency and improving the borrower experience. They plug right into your existing LOS and solves the document chaos between your team and your borrowers. Borrowers get a place where they can collaborate on loan documents at any time, and your team can easily name, organize, and push documents with the click of a button. Welcome to the future. I encourage you to go to able.ai for more information and schedule your demo today. So if you, Kyle, owned a bank of Kyle, and and you wanted to go get an LOS, you know, you're on Excel, you figured out what you wanted, you have your process, you go, you're meeting with them. What are the first couple questions you're asking them to try to figure out if it's the right fit?
Well, you know, there's some like technical jargon that you'd want to get out of the way. You want to make sure it's not written in a code that's, you know, archaic. You want to make sure it's kind of a modern app. One thing you got to make sure too, that it's written in a code that works on mobile and desktop.
Okay, hold on. I just got to pause you here because we're already going beyond what I feel like our, you know, audience.
Yeah.
You're talking about code with SBA lenders. Like,
right.
What? How are we going to go in the room? Now, I know I said I was Bank of Kyle, and you happen to know a thing or two, but like,
okay. Let me bring
so
it
they're
back.
trying to. You're trying to ask them about how the code is. Like, what are they? How do they even? If they answer, how do I even know if I like the answer?
Yeah, they could be like, it's B+. And you'd be like, great. And they're like, well, it's actually C+. You know, like that's not even a code. But no, well, that's the other thing is if it's Bank of Kyle, I'm going to take my CTO with me, right? Like that's the key. You got to get engaged from, you know, the top of your bank down, right? And so unfortunately, on the bank side, like there hasn't been a lot of innovation in software. Except, I mean, let's wind the clock back a little bit, right? Like banks were the original fintechs. Like I know that sounds weird, but to me, a bank was the original because basically online banking, they started that. They did that. Like remember? Well, I'm Gen X. Back in my day, we had to go do like. You had to go do your balance withdrawal and go into the ATM and find out if you had enough money to like pay your groceries, you know, when you were younger or in college or whatever. And banks were like, oh, well, let's build a website where people can log in and see their account information. And so that's financial data, right? In technology that creates a good user experience. Now that stuff banks really innovated well, but the behind the scenes things, you know, I know one of the cores we worked with was a green screen. Like I remember opening it for the first time to look up loan records at my bank and being like, oh my gosh. And somebody looked at me and says, you remember your command prompts? I'm like, no. I'm like, oh crap. Do you have like a Nintendo controller I can take here or something? Like I'm a Nintendo generation. This isn't going to work. And so the sad part for banks is a lot of the stuff that is really doing all the accounting, doing a lot of the account opening, those types of things, those technologies have not really evolved or not really been innovative. They've just kind of acquired other ones that were innovative and then bolted them all together to these kind of Franken cores, right? And so that's one of the challenges for banks. So
you need to ask if it can work with their other systems, right? That's like
well, that's one of the big challenges too. Yeah, because a lot of the cores that a lot of banks operate on aren't very easily API'd into or API'd out of. That's like a new thing. They didn't play well in the sandbox is the kind of the cliche way to say it.
And is API like how stuff gets connected?
It's actually apple pie ingredients. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, exactly. yeah. I heard a guy say that at a conference and I cracked up, you know, because I'm like, oh yeah, apple pie API. What does that stand for again? I always have to look it up. But yeah, dad joke there. Bad technology joke, I guess, one of the two. But yeah, basically that's how you connect it. And so just a brief description of an API, like how it works.
I mean, I feel like where the term's getting thrown around all the time nowadays as if people are expected to know what that is.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can give a brief the
way I like to explain it is, let's say you have a restaurant and I have a restaurant and we cook the same food, but we call it different things. And so basically, like let's say our menus, you have, you know, your French fries, I have, you know, freedom fries or whatever. They're the same thing. We would match those and say, oh, that means this means this, and it's just a mapping exercise. And so we'd go through our whole menu and map them all together. And then the cool part is the data would just do it once you get it built.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I get it. You may need to work on that analogy, but I totally get it.
Yeah. Yeah, right? Yeah.
Freedom fries. Okay.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah.
So you're trying to figure out, right? Because this is, I mean, a lot of lenders are in this position right now, and maybe they have a CTO at the bank. I assume they must have someone, but they probably don't know SBA lending.
Right.
So you have someone that knows SBA lending. You have someone that's a CTO, and then you have a software company trying to sell software. We're at the
Who
table.
hopefully knows SBA.
And hopefully, is that a question? Like, is this built for SBA or not?
Okay. So the answer you'll get will probably be kind of. So you need to really dig into that if you want to use it for SBA. So whenever you have like an applied function, or like a really specific lending program like leasing or something like that, or specifically here SBA, you need to ask that question, and you need to see them demonstrate that it can do what you need for SBA. So, for example, one of the most basic functions that a software needs to do for an SBA lender, especially on the origination side, is integrate with E-Tran, right? And that's not easy to do. Like sometimes those APIs don't work. And sometimes that system goes down, and so you have to work with the SBA to figure it out. Sometimes they just change things at random, and what worked yesterday doesn't work today. So that's one of the challenges of working with that system. And so a vendor needs to know that, hey, this is a bigger job than you think, and you need to have resources available to make those changes when SBA does, because you got to be able to move fast.
Interesting. So that's kind of a distinguishing factor in my head then. Like, did they build the software with SBA in mind? And then you mentioned like, so it's gonna plug into E-Tran, right? That's obviously that has to do that. But when you're having issues and stuff, like, does everyone need like a full-time employee at the bank that can like deal with the software kind of issues on an ongoing basis, or is it like someone from the software company that can assist?
It could be both. Like another thing you said, like, how would I know what technology I need? So before, a lot of banks wanted on-premise systems. So think of it like QuickBooks. If you own a business, you can do QuickBooks on your laptop, right? Or you can do QuickBooks online. And so that's QuickBooks in the cloud, right? Which online's really cool. Can pull all your account information in through APIs. It's a very, very modern way to do QuickBooks. Otherwise, you can do the old QuickBooks, right? And so banks previously wanted everything in their network. Right now, everybody's moving to the cloud, moving to Azure or Amazon, and they're benefiting from the security features of those big companies. Right? That's one of the nice parts about it. But like a lot of that's outsourced to the cloud, and so you might need a resource from the tech company that is one, doing customer support. Like, hey, we ran into a bug or a glitch. Nobody's perfect, right? Everybody builds stuff, and sometimes it works. I don't know if anybody's ever like assembled a table or something from IKEA. Sometimes it looks good. Sometimes, it's a little wobbly when you're done with it. Same thing with development of software. Sometimes they build it great. Sometimes it's not so great. So you need somebody to be able to support it. And the nice part is if it's in the cloud, they can just do a new release and they can support it themselves. So it's not a lot of work on the bank. Now, if it's on-prem, the opposite. It's a little wobbly. This is a little unstable. We got to give you a release. So someone from the bank has to take the time to then download the new release, update it, and then make sure they didn't lose any data, do a whole analysis to it, and then do it. So that takes a lot of time on the bank staff. So cloud is kind of the way, I would say, like, so, you want to go.
And maybe what they probably for security purposes were a little apprehensive about doing that at first, but now you see more coming onto the cloud.
Oh yeah. It's become much more accepted and kind of like probably moving towards a best practice, in all honesty.
I still don't know how I would choose an LOS because I get this question asked hey, what are you using? What are you using? I feel like no one is completely, ecstatic about their LOS, or everyone would be like, yeah, no, you've got to use these guys. Now people say good things about this one and that one, and I have some, opinions, and but I'm still like, it just seems like there's not perfect solution. Is it just like, why is that? Like, why can't, is it because all the banks have different processes? Is it because the technology is just being kind of sold in too much of a, you know, a way that's like cookie cutter and it doesn't fit right, or like what are the issues?
To me, I think it's time. Like SBA has resisted technology as an industry for a while. And then it's a small niche, right? Now it's a big program if you think about it, like the amount of transactions we do. But I think culturally as lenders, we made this hard to make it hard, right? In some ways. Now, in some days, it was that way. It was just a difficult program to manage. And so with all the nuance and things like that, there's the juice is worth the squeeze principle in software. And so one of the neat parts of when you develop a software, you can spread that software's cost across a big user base. So like, let's say like Spotify, right? They have unlimited people that they can sell this to. And it doesn't cost much. It's like $12 a month or whatever it is. But they spread that across millions and millions of people, and they're making billions after that, right? SBA is this small little market, and it's a high cost to build these types of apps. Unless you can take one that's kind of commercial and then tweak it to SBA, that might work. But you're going to lose some of the specialization in it. So,
Gotcha.
What happens is we'll probably get some decent LOSs here now that like everybody's looking for it. Borrowers expect it. Borrowers are like, hey, I want to work with whoever fills these forms out for me. I don't want to,
Right.
I don't care about the relationship. I have enough friends. I just need this loan and I need it done fast, right? That's kind of the mindset of the borrowers now. Like I would say probably you might have experienced this as a BDO where it's like, hey, I just want an easy process to get my money.
Well, the residential mortgages are getting super easy now, and that's a much bigger market than SBA, I would imagine.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so if you do a residential mortgage, it's super easy, right? Like, you can close at your house now. Like, wow, that's amazing. So I would love to see SBA get to that same level, but creating an app for this space, one, in the LOS world, it is the same jobs, right? We have all the same jobs that we have to get done to get something closed and documented before we get there. But everybody does things so differently. And so that's one of the challenges for all the LOS companies out there is you might sell this to, let's say, there's probably about 300 lenders you really want to pay attention to as a software company in this space that do enough volume that makes sense. And so of those 300 lenders, they're doing a lot of the same loan types. When I mean loan types, it's like business acquisitions, real estate loans, working capital, those types of loans. But they all do it in so many different ways. It's hard to please everybody.
That's making sense. And what you said really makes sense about like I'm like expecting a perfect solution because it's a bunch of money you're spending on software and you're doing it in a way where it's fine. You know how to do it as a BDO, as an underwriter, as a closer. You're happy, essentially. But the idea of implementing technology just seems like kind of like what you said, shiny object. It's like we're going to implement technology. It's going to drive efficiencies, and we're going to save money somehow. It's you're going to just jumble it all together. And then what happens on the other end is, well, it takes longer for me to do my job, let's say, and we get frustrated because it doesn't work perfectly.
Yep. And
then was there any savings? And are you better off just sticking with Excel? Now, long term, I don't think so, right? You have to keep going. But is it fair to say that these companies are not coming to market with the perfect solution? They're coming with a product, and then through different iterations, working with lenders, fine-tuning over several years, maybe you then get to a place where you see those efficiencies, cost savings, and a smoother process for the borrower and the lender.
Yeah, and like what you just said, I think is part of the perfect scenario. If you can find a vendor that is willing to work with you and you're willing to work with them, and hopefully, like you said, it's not frustrating. It's not a bad start like you're describing, like, oh, I got in this technology, it crashed all the time, or whatever like the scenario is that makes the friction, right? That's keeping it from being as efficient for you guys as it could. Finding that vendor that's willing to say, I'm going to put resources towards you and I'm going to understand your process. And I'm going to build some of this to your scopes and to some of the things you need. However, there are some things that are just, unfortunately, there's no way I could ever build this for you. and have it make money for me as the software company. So there needs to be kind of a two-way street there where it's like, okay, what's the core functionality you need? And then take the time to explain it why. Because that's a lot of times where tech companies struggle. Is like they need us to do this, whatever this thing is, right? And so the tech company's like, okay, let's build that. And they build that little piece, but they don't realize that that piece plugs into a bigger piece and another piece and another piece, and they're missing all of those. And so they just they put a Band-Aid, right, when they should have really thought about, okay, what are the upstream issues that this might be alleviating or creating, and the downstream effects too. So they have to understand the whole process. And that's one part where, as a tech company, you're kind of building these things and you're like, oh, this is really innovative. We're going to help save some time. But sometimes we didn't line it up with the process in the right way. So like you described, you build a tool and you put it out there and you realize you got it at the wrong time. You needed this information here. You've got it here. Oh, crap. Now we got to go back and rebuild the whole thing. And, then by that point, your users are like super frustrated. Oh, well, you built it, but it doesn't work right. And you're like, oh, okay, well, please explain to me how it doesn't work right. Those are the conversations you need to have with a vendor, because it's hard. You're kind of building something with the idea of doing it, but you may have never done it. And that's one of the hard parts for a lot of tech companies is understanding what you are trying to achieve, and then building an app that supports that.
Interesting. So is there like a question you can ask to determine what sort of iteration the software company is on, like how much experience they essentially have? Because if you're doing it for the first time versus like I've done this 100 times, like that whole process you just described about, problem, solution, working together, like, I'm sure you get better and better at it with the more experience you have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So yes, that is how this would work ideally, right? So if you're looking for a vendor and you want to understand, all right, what's your level of comfort working with me as a bank, or Bank of Kyle was our original analogy. If I need these things, will I get the resources to do them? And so there's a couple different approaches in software. And so some have like an off-the-shelf, it's ready to go, it does these core functionalities, this is what it does. However, the downside with the system like that is if you need that customization, you're probably not going to get it, right? They're already kind of like rigid in what they've got.
So would it be fair to say like a more mature type of software is going to be more rigid, but they have more experience, but a newer is going to be a little bit more, we're going to figure this out as we go, but we're willing to work with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's where a lot of modern software in new markets is. And I would say a lot of the LOSs you see out there are probably there because they're new. Like SBA hasn't really adopted a lot of these, or SBA lenders haven't really adopted a lot of LOSs in the past, right? They use their spreadsheets. And so one thing though, with the customization software, one of the dangers there is that this isn't a fully baked LOS or LMS or whatever you're going to do, or like digital onboarding, like bringing the client in to do applications. These may not have had a lot of transactions go through them. And so there may be a lot of bugs. There may be a lot of scenarios that it's not built for. Or worse, this app may not have ever even worked before, but they're trying to sell it to you. So you got to be really careful with that side too.
So people go to market with stuff that's like barely even ready yet.
Yeah, that is one of the dangers of technology these days is, we'll have you pay for the finishing of this app. And so, and great for them, right? That's a great thing. You've built a house 70%, let's say, and you can sell it for full value and get rent on it, which is the kind of the way modern software works. And it's not even done yet. You don't even know how to finish it yet. But you're like, we'll work with them and figure it out, Yeah. I mean, hopefully they're good enough to do that, but that's a pretty tall order.
It's a little bit of a leap of faith for the lender. By the way, why the LOS and the digital onboarding, I feel like that's two different things, because no one that I know uses the digital onboarding for that comes with an LOS, if it even comes with an LOS. But the digital onboarding is kind of like where it's at, in my opinion, because that's the stuff that's facing the borrower.
Exactly.
That's the stuff that's going to make a difference. So how should lenders be thinking about the differences between like the two?
First, if you're really reviewing software, you should go through that digital onboarding experience like a borrower would. Like, walk through it, see if it makes sense, see if it works, and then have it push into that LOS that you're thinking of, and then say, oh, can I actually get the jobs done I need to get done? For example, like E-Tran or all the SBA docs, is it generated off of that data that we initially put in? Does it go and pull credit automatically? All these things are capabilities and systems in consumer or residential mortgage, like you mentioned before. Those things are just automated as part of the digital onboarding. SBA could be there. Some of the really innovative vendors that might be out there might be getting it to that place, and that would be really exciting. But yeah, you need to really, as if I was purchasing it, you need to get your hands dirty a little bit. Don't just assume that it works. Like there have been tech companies that have come into this space and they show the technology in PowerPoint, which is a red flag.
That's a red flag.
Big red flag. Yeah. If you don't see it in a live environment or have the ability to do like a proof of concept. So one of the things I would do with the LOSs that I sold and the LMSs I would sell, I would have them send me a deal. And in fact, I had dinner with a lender who sent me the nastiest 7A loan I've ever seen with 7 different affiliates. We had to spread them all. And he laughed when he sent me this file. And then he laughed to his credit people when he's like, I sent him this one. And then when I had to put it into the system, and I had a former SBA underwriter on staff at our place, I sent it over to him. I'm like, oh boy, his name was Ray too. I was like, oh, Ray, I am sorry. And he like called me. He's like, are you for real? Like, do we really have to build this in the system? I'm like, yeah, this is what they expect. And like the write-up was like 60 pages. And so we put it into the system, and it broke some things. Like, we thought we'd had some of this stuff figured out already. And then we were like, oh, geez, we got some things to fix if people want to use it this way. Just because, like we thought we had it right. But, when you put all that data into it, a really hairy, like crazy 7A loan, and then try to do all the financials, it was challenging. And so they ended up not purchasing our software, right? But we learned in that situation what we were missing. And so I made that my example deal from then on once we fixed it.
Well, something you just said kind of makes a lot of sense to me, which is that you have people at the software company that have worked at a bank. I bet there's a lot of software companies where no one inside there has ever worked at a bank.
Well, and that's actually how I got into software. I was working at my bank as an SBA lender, and everything was so manual. We were having so many problems trying to get deals closed and just working through it. And I was like, somebody has got to create an app for this, or I'm going to go do it. And so, I went and met with PCFS and was like, hey, heard you have an app for this, like, all these different things. And, instantly they were like, do you want to work here? And I was like, well, no, I want to see if I like working with small businesses. I want to see if my bank will purchase this. This might really alleviate some problems that we're having. The bank wasn't willing to buy software at the time. And that was challenging. And so when you're doing things so manually, it's stressful. Like, if you don't have that back office support, and then, you're doing everything by hand, like as a BDO, that's a really challenging job. Plus keep the borrowers happy, plus keep the bank happy. It's a challenging role you're in, and all the other BDOs out there are in. And technology can help. It can make it faster, can make it more efficient. So I took the job at PCFS.
Were they in the SBA space at that time?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So PCFS has a great loan accounting software. And I don't want to make a commercial for them.
It's
but
okay. You haven't worked there in like 2 jobs. So.
Yeah. But I mean, their 1502 reporting automation is fantastic. Like
I feel like everyone uses them in some or has like one of the systems. Like I know we use it somewhere like back in the back.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. Like the 1502 reporting, there's not a lot of loan accounting softwares out there that can do it, and theirs can. And
That's the
consistent.
crazy part. How we have the digital onboarding that goes into LOS, that goes into PCFS. Like you got all these systems now being like put together.
Yeah, and that's a good point. So we'll go back to digital onboarding in a second. So you have digital onboarding, borrower experience. That's probably one of the most important parts of the app. Second is the LOS, where you're doing all your origination jobs, right? E-Tran, generating our SBA docs, doing your underwriting, cash flow analysis potentially, and then getting everything packaged to close, right? And keeping track of everything, all your insurance that you have to get, all the different things. All that has to go in to the servicing software, where some poor portfolio manager has to track all that information in spreadsheets manually or with Outlook or whatever they're using, or Post-it notes, and try not to go insane managing a big portfolio of loans. And then that data has to go into the core or to the data lake or the data repository to get it all into the reporting for the whole bank. And so that's kind of the challenges of this technology space is you've got all these different components that do a little bit of different things, and they all need to work together.
Right.
And the core typically doesn't work well with others. And then it can't do loan accounting properly either. And so that's one of the other challenges, not on the origination side, but on the servicing side, is a lot of these cores can't do the mathematics that SBA requires.
Wasn't that the most basic part of it?
The math?
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Like, what's my payment? What's the principal balance? Like,
yeah, can't do that. The cores.
How is that possible?
Right? Great question.
When do you find that out? When you've already paid, hundreds of thousands and spent a year putting it all together, and then you get to a point where it's like, oh, wait, this doesn't work. Then what? What can you do?
Well, unfortunately, there's a couple things that banks do in that situation. So let's say we're on one of the big 5 cores, and we've hired a great sales team. We've just originated, let's say, $40 million in SBA 7A loans. Ooh, and we want to sell them on the secondary market. So let's add that level of complexity to them too, and track the premium income and try to stay FASB compliant. If you're putting it on a core, it's not going to be able to do it. It's going to throw your interest pay due dates off right away. It's not going to split the principal and interest correctly. And the reason is a lot of cores struggle with this is they treat them like a mortgage. The interest calculation isn't a day, paid on date of receipt. And so it's not charging interest on each of those days. And so that's where the issue really starts. Now, that's just one example of many of the issues with the core trying to do SBA loan accounting. But unfortunately, nobody really talks about that. So I'm glad we're putting it on the podcast because I've had so many portfolio managers come to me and CFOs and things like that, and they say the same thing. What do you mean a core can't do this right? It's like they can't. They don't do the math right. The interest calcs aren't right. Nothing's right. I've had CEOs say, I can't believe that's true. I'm like, let's put it in Excel. I'll show you. This is how it's supposed to look. This is what it looks like. And they'll walk away kind of shocked. Even with that, with all of these assets on their core not accounting properly, I've had banks say, well, too bad. We're just going to keep them on the core. And then some poor person in the back shop has to do the most amazing Excel spreadsheet magic you've ever seen and has to do all the loan accounting on that every month to put it in the 1502. And that's alleviating risk, right?
Oh, geez. And you do all that technology to avoid having to do all that Excel work, and then you end up having to do it anyway. So, what if, because there's such a leap of faith with the lender and the software provider relationship with, essentially, you've got to do the work to build it and then hope it's going to work how you're expecting it to work. But, what are the outs at the end? Because it's almost like when you go through the loan process for, 2 months and then a lender just says, oh, by the way, we want this now. It's like, okay, well, I didn't know that, but I'm too deep into this process to do anything else.
Yeah. A good example of this would have been PPP, where you probably went through this too, we'd have kind of the basic guidelines of what was supposed to happen, right? And then on Friday night, it'd change, right? And so, but by Monday, this thing had to be working again.
Right, I remember this.
And so we would develop all week and think we're like, all right, we got this app, it's ready to go. You know, we've thought through how the upstream effects are there, how the initial things need to happen, and then the order of the process. And then, you know, there'd be a curveball thrown there at the end. So that was really hard. We'd build. Friday come around, oh man, and then we'd have to build all weekend and then have it ready by Monday to work. And that was very challenging. So that's the example. What was your specific question though on that? I kind of lost my thread.
Like if you go down the road, spend a year, a bunch of money, time building something, and then you find out it's just not what you expected, it didn't work right. Like, is there a way to unwind it, or you kind of just stuck with it?
I've seen that happen quite a bit. That usually doesn't work out well. So as a software company and a software provider, you really have like 2 months, I would say, to get this system up and running with a new client before they're just like, forget it, I'll just do everything manually. Because that's the comfort, right? Like, you're trying to give a system that changes behavior. And so that's one of the biggest challenges is adoption of software. And so, like, if it's going to take that long to get developed, you probably aren't going to get there. You need the core functionality to work really right away. And so that's one thing as you're shopping for software out there, it's okay to have some of those nice to haves later, but you need some very core functionality that hits your process right away.
They should be able to bang that out in like 90 days.
It depends. You know, some implementations are 2 weeks, basically. Just get it installed, get it going.
Oh, wow.
Now the custom side can be years with some of these apps out
like
there.
Custom? Like just I'm going to design my own thing as a bank?
Oh, no. Well,
or
kind of.
Like bring it on like Encino or whatever and customizing it.
Yeah. So that, like, great example of Encino. Now I'm not an expert on Encino. They're a lot bigger than me, so I don't want to say anything that gets me sued or anything. But that's a very custom
Let's just
platform.
say a company that rhymes with cappuccino.
Cappuccino. Okay, so Kyle's Cappuccino software, fully custom. To fully implement a system like that in a specific software environment like they're in, or like Cappuccino's in, that can take years, and it's a lot of back and forth.
That's what I'm used to. I've used that in all my like shops.
Yeah,
and I just feel like it's forever. Like you're working, it's just like hours every single day to try to get it to where you need to get it.
Yeah, and if you don't have the resources for that, you're a small SBA shop, and you don't have somebody that can just be the ninja for that, or whatever the specialization they call it for being the best at that system and communicating and things like that, and having like a workflow Sigma 6 black belt, you know, that could be a really hard lift for an SBA shop who's just, you know, trying to do 150 million or whatever it is for their production. So, yeah, I mean, so that, to me, that would be a bad choice. Not Cappuccino, but if you're going to go full custom and you don't have the resources or the time to really dedicate to it, it's probably not going to work out very well.
What about custom? Like how?
Yeah, build it from scratch. What if I just go to all of them and I just don't like anything I'm here, and I'm saying, you know what, I'm going to build it myself. Mm-hmm.
Like,
do it.
Is that a good idea?
No. No, it's not. But you could try, and maybe you'd be successful. But, you know, it's one of those things where everybody does origination a little bit differently, right? And in a functional market, and I think if SBA was a little bigger or a little more open to technology, we would have had a lot of these folks try and fail. And then somebody would be like, oh, hey, this works. And then people are like, hey, that does work. Let's all adopt that. That's a good practice. It does things right. It does things well. We need some of that. We need some of that innovation in this space, because
you just got to get to a certain point, I guess, where it makes sense, because you can't be a $50 million production shop and like create your own software. No,
that would be way too expensive. Like, to build an app like this, I mean, it's going to take millions of dollars. Like at this time, like, you know, some people might be able to do it for less. But it won't be a fully baked app, right? It'll have some basic stuff. But there are a lot of innovative vendors out there trying, and they're getting there. It's just going to take time. So, you know, as an SBA person, you just need to be a little bit patient, and maybe lower your expectations just a little bit right now, because there's a lot of nuance to this, and it's going to take time for those vendors to figure that out, like all the different things with SBA that's different than other commercial loans or other commercial products.
That makes sense.
But yeah, I mean, they'll get there if they're a good vendor and they're a well-run business and things like that. It just takes time.
I want to go to what you said about adoption, because that in our industry, where everyone always talks about how everyone has been doing this for 25 plus years and sometimes much longer. And if you have that type of industry where it is a more seasoned workforce and they've been doing it longer the other way, that adoption becomes really challenging. Have you seen any best practices for ways like banks have been able to get their employees to adopt the software, other than saying you have to?
The you have to has to happen. I'll just be honest with you. Like with a big group of people, like especially people with various like abilities with technology, someone at the top, like the SBA division manager or operations manager, has to put their foot down and say, everybody needs to use this thing. Including them. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it should be making their lives easier. If it isn't, like, you probably bought the wrong thing. And so that has to happen. There has to be good training. Like, that's the other thing too, is some apps are really great, but they don't really train you too well, or the training's really cumbersome, or it's like, really boring. It's like taught by Ben Stein. So you're just like asleep, However, on the other side of that, as lenders and as SBA professionals, we need to be inquisitive. We need to figure things out. Like, we need to get into a system and say, you know what, I'm going to figure this thing out. And so that's the responsibility each individual needs to make then when their company's trying to implement technology. It's probably not intuitive. Like, maybe not. Hopefully it is. But you got to get in there and like take the time to try to do your job in it for a few times. Don't just get to it and just be like, this is different. I'm done. You got to get in there and really like, okay, so how does this work? And you want to be like a good student of technology, right? Which means you got to study it a little bit and you got to work with it a little bit. And that's really the key for adoption, is get curious, get in there. It may not make sense the first time you do it, but then after a few times, you'll probably be like, oh, I did just save myself like 60 minutes. Like, I didn't have to fill that out manually. Woohoo,
Yeah, I mean, to fight technology is kind of silly. I mean, we use it everywhere in our lives.
Very much so. Yeah, very much.
I'm going to ask you one more question and then I'm going to let you go.
Sure.
We've been talking a lot about AI around here.
Oh, all right.
And just like hearing this conversation and how we're kind of early with implementing all this technology into our systems, but AI is like, that's like the new stuff for all industries right now. That's like the hot thing. So like, do you think AI is really going to disrupt our industry? And if so, like, when do you think that is going to happen?
That's a good question. Now with AI, I would say that is a little bit of the shiny object right now, right? And so you have to actually kind of say like, all right, what is artificial intelligence? And then what do we have now? And what could benefit this space in SBA? And so for me, like right now, I would say machine learning is really what's going to innovate in SBA. And by machine learning, I mean just a machine that learns a job and can follow the protocol, right? Like, it sounds very nerdy. But basically, once we figure out our processes and we know our jobs that need to get done, you could build rule sets, right? Like, a really annoying Excel spreadsheet. It has like the if and or buts and those things. That's what machine learning does. Like, basically, let's say we have a borrower that applies on our digital onboarding and automatically pulls their credit, goes to a data source, pulls the credit down, looks at their credit score and says, oh, darn, below 680. or 660 or whatever the bank's minimum is. And then, so that screens out right away. Next one comes in. Oh, all right. 705. Perfect. Boom. Let's move to the next step. Okay. Let's identify who they are. Or let's do all these other steps. And so that's where the machine learning and the AI could really speed this up.
I'm going to end with this because this is an interesting one because the SBA recently increased their small loan program to $500,000.
Yeah.
And these loans can be scored through an SBSS score.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way today that I could point someone to a website, a page on the World Wide Web, where they can go and input, the ownership percentages, the EIN numbers, the basic information, basically that you would need to enter into like E-Tran or whatever, and for them to hit submit and get instant approved or declined essentially by inputting that stuff to E-Tran, getting the score, measuring it against their requirements at the bank, and then if it's, if then whatever, feed the information to the borrower, and if it's the client, send out a letter, whatever, if it's approved, get it in front of the right, person at the bank. Like, is that possible? It seems possible.
There's a lot to unpack in that. It should be possible, right? And it will be, I would say, in the next year or two. I don't know if anybody has got it to that level of accuracy as well as effectiveness yet. And I need to walk around the vendors there too and kind of look around and see what's new. But I know there are people working very hard on making that happen.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So
I thought that was my original idea just now.
Oh, no. People have thought about this a long time. It's a great original idea. But yeah, a lot of people have had that original idea and have been like, ooh, how do we do it? And then that's the catch, though, is how do we do it? Because you're right. You asked earlier a little bit like, is our industry going to be disrupted by AI or by this technology? And it could. It could be disrupted. I mean, the BDO model could be completely broken if somebody could just go to a website and apply online. And what do we need a BDO for? Or BDOs could basically take technology and break the bank model and say, well, this bank doesn't like these deals. I can't get anything closed. I got all these people coming in through an online channel. I'll just plug into another bank and become almost like a broker. So technology could change the way we do this in a lot of different ways. To me, like I know a lot of people are afraid of AI or think it's going to end the world or cause some sort of machine apocalypse or Terminator 2 or 3, whichever we're going to pick. I see it as enhancing everything we're doing. And ChatGPT is a great example of that. Just go play with that software. It's pretty interesting.
It is cool. I started playing around with it a lot more.
Yeah.
My friend Shane, who's been on the podcast, Pearson, he's gotten me real into it because he's really into it, and it's really crazy stuff what it can do.
Oh, totally. I mean, when it first came out, I had a really long paper I wrote in my master's on this kind of old economist, and I just put my thesis into ChatGPT and hit enter. It basically wrote my paper for me, and I was like, what? Like, it took it 30 seconds. That took me an entire semester to just write that one paper.
That's incredible.
I was like, that is amazing. And it was pretty accurate and like made good points. And I was like, wow, this is a neat tool. So yeah, it is all about prompting it. And so one of the neat parts about that technology is it's great with language. It's great with writing. It does all these things. It recognizes things. Is it truly AI? Maybe. I mean, it's learning, right? It's understanding. Now, the neat part for the next step in that type of technology is it's going to know you, and then it's going to know me, and it's going to know what we want and need. So it's going to go out and scour all the data out there and say, hey, Ray, you want to do podcasts? Check out this new thing on podcasts. You'd probably love this. Like, it's going to find those relationships and those connections to you. And that's going to be really neat. It's not there yet, but that's when we really start to see this stuff take off. But yeah, I think AI could very much enhance this industry. And technology, if it leaps, it could disrupt this industry in some ways. And so, however, as people who study SBA and who are engaged in this program, That's why it's so important to find the innovative technology out there and stay on top of it and know what it is, because it could replace you, right? Like that's the scariest point that everybody says with AI. Oh, like Elon Musk said the other day, people won't need to work anymore thanks to AI. Lofty goal, but that's the fear. So, but I think as you play with these things like ChatGPT, you go out there and you look at the different software vendors and you do live demos in the software, making sure that you're like typing stuff in and doing the work in the software. Like that is going to help them get better. It's going to help you get better. It's going to help our industry get better. And it's also going to like create a great borrower experience. And that's kind of what we're all for, right? Is getting the money out there to Main Street, helping these small businesses grow in the most efficient way we can. And that's really what technology is about. And that's one reason I was very passionate about it, because, you could help a borrower, but if you could help a bank, you could help so many borrowers. And if you could help the industry with innovative technology, think of all the people that you would be affecting positively with this type of app. And so that's kind of the thing that I hope the vendors out there are thinking about. And I hope also the consumers of that software are thinking about as well.
This is going to be a really fun episode to watch back in 10 years to see what actually unfolded. But
yeah, exactly.
Kyle, thanks for stopping by the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast. So I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, that's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode of the Art of SBA Lending. And if you have any feedback or suggestions, email me at ray@artofsba.com. Until next time, ta-ta.